And, people, well, you're such a pessimist. Well, I've been a pessimist for a long time. And it is going to make us very rich to be pessimists. So, Andy, the thing that we want to talk about right now is you go macro, which I was blown away when I first heard you talking about the BRICS, because I heard about the BRICS about 10 years ago. So the BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now Saudi Arabia.
I'm concerned about the BRICS because of what is happening in this country, because of the weaponizing of the dollar, because the decisions that this administration has made. I believe we have pushed the majority of the world, really, outside of the Western influence, the countries in the European Union, the United Kingdom, Canada, the United States, Japan. The rest of the world is coalescing together in a chorus of unity against the West. And
right. What you're saying is they're pissed off and they're not going to put up with the U.S. bullying anymore.
That's right. And I think they look at the West as being hypocritical. And when you weaponize the dollar as the world reserve currency, the way the United States did against Russia, you incentivize countries to find an alternative, wondering if they're going to be next on the chopping board, if they're next that is going to be a country that is viewed as not parallel or aligned to U.S. interests. What does that mean? And how many countries have the U.S. sanctioned along the way and cut off their access to SWIFT? And I think that's having consequences to where we see not only the BRICS, but the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which represents pretty darn close to 60% of human population, 60% of the Eurasian landmass, the Belt Road Initiative, the BRICS, as we mentioned, the Eurasian Economic Union, all of these countries. And if you look, most of the countries involved in these are all part of these same entities. They're rallying together against
us,
against the West, and they're doing so by accumulating tremendous amount of commodities. And one of the countries that I focus on a lot has been Turkey, as an example. Turkey imported more gold than any country in the world last year, and they have formally applied for BRICS. In January, Turkey imported 58.3 tons of gold from Switzerland. And that is by far the most of any month on records going back to 2012, according to Swiss customs data. So these countries are using commodities like gold as I believe, as a vehicle that will allow everyone equal footing at the table, equal say at the table. And I think that's exactly what they're going to do. Using a country like Turkey is exactly the one to show that this is exactly what they're all doing. Well, what gives the dollar its world reserve status is the fact that every country on the planet has had to own dollars since 1994 in order to buy oil. And that was the deal that we struck with the Saudi Kingdom and by extension, OPEC. Now, it's important to note that the Belt Road Initiative, which is the largest infrastructure project in human history, every one of the 13 producing OPEC countries are on the Belt Road. They are all lining up on the same side of the ledger. So when Saudi Arabia, as we've talked about before, first was signed a joint operation agreement with Russia, I was screaming in September of 2021, that's it. Knowing that they would join BRICS, it became very obvious that this would happen, and indeed they did. They have formally applied for BRICS. And if you realize that what has given the dollar this synthetic demand globally is the need to accumulate it to buy oil, if everyone doesn't need to hold dollars anymore because OPEC decides to open up oil production to other currencies, it is a massive, massive deal. And what did Saudi Arabia just tell us in Davos 2-3 weeks ago? We are open to accepting other currencies for oil. So this is a massive deal. Really, it's a massive deal. What it does is it will put a knife right in the heart of the US dollar and its synthetic demand and its hegemony on a global stage. It's a huge, huge, huge deal.
So let me give some dates. But in 1974 the deal was cut that the world would have to buy oil in U.S. dollars. They're all saying right now, adios dollars. And Andy's saying 60% today of the world's population will stop using the U.S. dollar. And that's what gives us power. So those of you who are saving those fake dollars, you're in serious trouble right now. We don't save dollars. We save gold coins and silver coins stored someplace else, because that is the challenge with gold and silver, is the storage. So I want you to understand this. This goes back to what they always say at school: go to school, get a good job, work hard, pay taxes, and save money and invest in the stock market. And that's what we're talking about now. That dollar gave it the power to the stock market to go through the roof. And when they talk about the bubble, the 3 times bubble, it's stocks, paper assets, real estate, and the dollar is going to crash. So all you out there, savers out there, I would pay attention right now, because if you still think you're still believing in the power of the dollar, you're in serious trouble.
Before we started this show, you were talking about a meeting that happened in November with the FDIC. So can you...
What is the FDIC, first of all?
Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, I believe is what it stands for. It's the organization that backs all the deposits held at the banks in the United States, to which there's over $9 trillion in deposits being backed by a few $100 billion in assets or in cash by the FDIC. In essence, it's a scam. And they don't have enough money to back the deposits, and people need to understand this. And thanks to the leverage that has been created, this will make the Great Depression look like a walk in the park when these banks fail, because they are all so leveraged. They have removed all the reserve requirements ever since the pandemic. And so when you deposit money in the bank, they don't hold it. Heck, right now they would take your deposit. If you notice, even though interest rates have gone up, what you get in the banks is still a fraction of a percent.
Right. In other words, you and me and everybody else runs in there and say, we want our money back, but there's no money there.
That's right. In fact, if you give them $100,000, they're not going to leave that in there. They'll go buy, 3-month treasuries earning 4% instead of leaving it in the bank as a reserve. They were allowed to relinquish all reserve requirements during the pandemic. And so this has created a problem. The FDIC Systemic Resolution Advisory Committee had a meeting in November that leaked out to YouTube. And the meeting, they basically said, this is a problem that the public needs to understand, that there will be bail-ins and runs on the bank. The institutions, the banks already know this.
Can you explain what a bail-in is?
So in 2008, when the banks went upside down based upon the poor decisions that they made, the public, the taxpayers, bailed out the banks. The money that was given to them by the government is funded by the taxpayer. That's been made illegal. So they can't be bailed out anymore by us taxpayers. Instead, they get bailed in by the depositors of the bank, who are now considered unsecured creditors. Meaning, just like they did in Cyprus. In Cyprus, anyone who had over $100,000, that money over $100,000 was given into the bank like in bankruptcy protection, where the money was used to make the bank whole, and any money left over would be given back out to the depositors, or shares of a defunct bank given back out to the depositors in a pro fashion. In other words,
I'm going to explain that. Okay, if you have savings in, let's say, Bank of America, and it requires a bail-in, they're going to keep your money and give you these fake assets called shares in Bank of America. They said, ladies and gentlemen, I think there's going to be a run on our banks. They're going to yank our money out, and that means all you savers out there, you good little boys and girls, you'll become owners of the bank. They're going to give you stocks instead of your cash. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right. And they say, not only do the institutions know this is coming, that the people need to understand that bailouts are gone and bail-ins are now the order of the day. But they were very succinct in saying, the problem is if we tell the public this, the unintended consequences will incite a run on the banks. And this is a very scary deal. In fact, I was very, very, very concerned about my own personal money in the bank, to the point where I've been buying gold and silver every 2 weeks for 34 years. I'm ready to go buy a whole lot more, just because I don't want money in the banks, because they're telling us it's coming and the banks know it and the people need to know it, but we really don't want to let them know it, because there will be unintended consequences. It will only incite and expedite this run on the banks, which they deem